welcome to Outside of the Classroom. It's your boy Pham, speaker, writer, and entrepreneur. Each week, we bring together inspiring guests to help you learn useful shit, prepare you for success, and do work you love. Thanks for spending time with me today, and without further ado, let's dive on in. What is going on, everybody? It's your boy Pham, and welcome to Outside of the Classroom. Today's guest is Heath Padgett, and he has had an amazing journey quitting his cubicle job to travel all across the country. So far, he has worked 50 jobs in 50 different states to capture the story of hourly workers, and I'm so excited for this episode today. And in this episode, we talk about, should all college graduates live an unconventional life? Why is Heath insisting to do free work when the job market is so tough? And how is finding the perfect career like finding the perfect significant other? And so much more. Make sure to go back to the show notes at www.outsideoftheclassroom.com/Heath to find all the resources and everything we talked about today. And without further ado, let's dive on into today's episode with the one and only Heath Padgett. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Tam.
Heath, I'm so excited to talk to you today because you have had such an incredible journey. You know, you quit your sales job to travel across the country in an RV with your newly wedded wife. You've been featured on CNN, Business Insider, Yahoo, and so many more outlets. And I would love for you to take a moment to just introduce yourself to the listeners.
Yeah, man. Well, first of all, it's been awesome watching you because you were kind of one of the first people I think that heard about my journey. I don't even know how we got connected. I think it was like LinkedIn. And
It was LinkedIn.
Yeah, you've been kind of following my journey for over a year now, and I've just appreciated and it's been awesome seeing you grow and start finding your own way. So first of all, thank you. And secondly, so my story is kind of a jumbled mess, kind of like our lives, and I'm piecing it all together as I go. But my story is that my wife and I were about to get married last year around springtime, and we both wanted something more than the jobs that we had taken right after college. And we just felt like we didn't want to settle. In other words, like I was in a sales job and I just really wanted to see what else was out there. I wanted to explore. I wanted all those things that a lot of 20-year-olds want after graduating from college, but lacked the funds, lacked the know-how to go out and do that. And so, but I decided to take a leap of faith. So much to my parents and my friends and my in-laws' dismay, I quit my job in sales just a few months before getting married, and my wife and I started kind of scheming a cross-country honeymoon without really telling a lot of people. We literally made like this secret plan because we didn't want to approach some like planned all of our friends and say, hey, we're going to quit our jobs and we're going to go travel around the country and just be basically hippies. And because we didn't have a solid plan at that point. And so the kind of the short version of that story is that I ended up meeting up with a mentor of mine named Ja Jung, who did a project called 100 Days of Rejection. He gave me some really good advice on a project that I could work on while I was on the road, and that was to work a different job in every state while we traveled throughout the country. And so I thought that was an incredible idea. I said, I'm going to do that. And so from there, I found a sponsor to help pay for our travels. We bought an RV off Craigslist using our savings, and we found some freelance blog gigs. I started doing some consulting to help pay our way, and the company that ended up sponsoring us, they're called Snag a Job. They're an online job board for hourly workers. They helped me find jobs across the country. I found half the jobs on my own, and they actually sent us a bunch of film equipment to turn this project into a feature-length documentary, something I'd always wanted to do, but I had no idea how to do it. And so we just went out and learning along the way. Took off 4 days after our wedding and spent the next 7 months traveling to 48 states, then Hawaii. I'm going to Alaska this weekend for my last job. And we just made it happen. The trip is called Hourly America, and it's all about kind of our crazy unconventional journey across the United States of me working different hourly jobs, interviewing people about their work, how they found their passion, and just learning a lot along the way. And it's been a really amazing journey.
That is so awesome. And how what was Zha's reaction when he heard you or actually doing his idea?
So we met, like when you find a mentor or somebody that you look up to and you realize that they're living in the same town as you want to immediately reach out to them and ask for coffee.
Mhm.
I saw on Twitter yesterday that you reached out to Brian Harrison, and I just found his stuff online too. And he's asked about a call, and I'm like, you're really good at that, Tam. Like you're really good at wanting to connect with people. I have no doubt that you're going to be incredibly
he
successful because of that. What?
he did call me.
He,
And I didn't really ask for help. I just wanted to tell him that, you're awesome, Brian. Keep doing what you're doing.
that's all. I'm sure he appreciated that. Compliments never get old, especially when they're authentic. But anyway, so I met up with Ja. I didn't know him at that point. He didn't know me, but he had already received a lot of publicity. He already got a publishing contract from Random House. He was already traveling around the country speaking. He was ahead of where I was. And I just wanted to kind of pick his brain, and I was appreciative of his time. So after our coffee meetup, he gave me this idea to work a job in every state. And as soon as he said it, I said, I think I'll do that. But if you think about it, that's kind of crazy because I'm saying that I'm committing myself to work 50 jobs over the next year across the country at just like that, just at on a whim. And so I'm thinking he's probably not actually thinking I'm going to do this project. And if he does, then he's probably thinking I'm crazy or whatever. And so as things kind of started to develop and it became more real as we bought the RV, as we found the sponsor, as we begin to tell our friends and family, I never actually really reached back out to him. And then a few months later, we were out in California. I'd already worked 4 or 5 jobs at that point. We were full fledged into this. We were going. We had our blogs going, and he had finished writing his book at that point. His wife got a job at Google, and so he had just moved to the Bay Area. And I got a phone call from him, and I missed it, and I got a voicemail, and it was and I hadn't talked to him since our meeting, and he was like, Heath, this is Ja. I just saw that you're doing this. You're like out there traveling around the country. You're making. He was so excited. So a couple days later, when we were going through the Bay Area, we had lunch, and then we attended a conference called World Domination Summit up in Portland, Oregon.
Oh, yeah.
And he flew up there and he stayed in the RV with us. Then we just became friends, and I've actually done a lot of work with him since our journey and helping him, launch his business around his book, promote his book, and things like that. So it kind of came full circle, and so yeah.
Very, very awesome journey. And I love how you just had this idea and you didn't just go on it without like blindlessly. You had a plan, you got sponsors, it was very systematic, which I really admire. But I just want to segue. Most people prefer stability. They actually want to go through the system of going to college, getting a cubicle job, and working a 9 to 5. Would you recommend others, like maybe college graduates now, to go off on a venture like yourself, something crazy like this, or is a conventional life only for certain people? What are your thoughts about that?
I think that certain people definitely have different tolerance levels for risk taking. And so that's something that is just different. I think you can grow that comfort zone, but just inherently, we all have different levels of risk that we're willing to take in life.
Mhm.
But that being said, I was talking to a group of students the other day up in Chicago, and we were talking about job security, and they were complaining about how they couldn't get a job because they didn't have any experience, and they didn't have any experience, and if they couldn't get a job, then how are they going to get experience? It was kind of that ever revolving excuse that a lot of college students have, and there can be validity to it, but there also can be a lot of crap to it because
Excuses.
yeah, excuses. Because here's the way I see it with job security in 2015. If you're young and you want job security, the only way to get job security, excuse my French, is to do cool shit. And what I
Yeah.
mean by that is to like get outside your comfort zone, build some kind of I take some kind of idea, turn it into reality, and push it out into the world. And keep doing that and keep being a little reckless, keep going outside the lines. Because if you graduate from college and you go get that stereotypical entry level job just like everybody else, and,
Mhm.
and don't get me wrong, I know we have to start somewhere. We all have to do that. but you don't always have to walk inside the lines and do what everybody else is doing, because if you're stay in that area where you don't stick out and your resume is the exact same as everybody else's, how do you ever expect to exceed if you're somebody who wants to be more than just the status quo? And
Yeah.
so for me, like the way I see job security is if at any point I needed to go out and get a job, how many opportunities would there be out there for me? Not job security in the sense that am I working at one company and am I going to be able to work here for the next 20 years? Because if you have that kind of job security, then first of all, your job is not that important and that company is not doing a good job, because if they just said, "Hey, we're going to keep you on board for the next 20 years no matter how good of a job you do," then what is it? I mean, what does that even mean? I
Hmm.
mean, I at this point if I needed to, I could go get an hourly job that I had worked, and some of them I really enjoyed in just about any state across the country. And because of my experience, I'd no doubt um, be making more money in a lot of jobs, traditional jobs, if I went
Hmm.
to them because of the experience that I now have. And so that's kind of how I see job security, in the sense that if you want to have job security, that's how many options, how much do you stand out? How many businesses have you started or tried or failed at? How many cool projects have you executed on at a young age? And because the more different, the more things you've done, the more you've tried and experimented, that's job security.
Exactly. Some people think to be unique, you have to start a business or do an app or go on some crazy quest like what you've done. But I'm sure there's so many more ways that you can be unique. Maybe starting a blog, or
Yeah.
making YouTube videos, or just being different from the crowd. Have you seen any cool recommendations or stories that maybe you've seen recently about people doing something different, like doing cool projects to stand out of the crowd?
Well, I mean, you're an example of that in my eyes. I mean, you're doing that. You had a Facebook video the other day that I got like 30,000 views or something, for you talking about your college rejections, and that, I mean, you're kind of hustling in place, like you don't have to necessarily travel and go on some kind of crazy quest or start this $1 million tech company in order to be changing the world. I mean, a lot of you can do this from anywhere, and there's no set way to do it. And so I think that to be able to say, well, I can't travel the country like Heath did, or I can't work a job in every state, or I can't, go start this business. That's just not my skill set. Well, there's always things that you can do to push yourself outside your comfort zone. I think one of the smallest things that you can do that proves to help, kind of push yourself out there, is while you're working somewhere full time, go do other work for other people also. Because the thing is, if you just only do the kind of the status quo within your own job and never do any kind of work with like another person, if it's say you're working in a job and you're a designer, doing graphic design for a company,
Mm.
and you're only there and you're like, I'm content in this job, I could see myself working here for a few years, but I also may want to try other things. I think one of the best things that you can do is devote a couple hours a week to doing some kind of free work for another company, or doing some kind of freelance work on the side. That way you don't just have one thing on your plate, because then if you lose that job, what kind of options do you have? I mean, having a wealth of options at a young age is I almost like a it's almost like a currency for young people. Like options are almost like a currency for young people, because the more things that you can go out and try, the more things that you can cross off your list and say, I do like this or I don't like this. And so I think just always being open to trying new things, being willing to do free work for people until you get your craft to a certain point to where you've earned that payment. Those are ways that people can kind of hustle in place.
Definitely. So going back to the college graduate who's working a job in a cubicle, a full-time job, and they're not very happy, like what you've done. You weren't happy with your sales job. Is there any alternatives? Not alternatives, but is there any ways you can test drive other different careers while still working your full-time hustle and doing stuff on the side?
Yeah, definitely. So I would I wrote a blog about this, and I'll we can link back to it in the show notes. But
Yeah, sure.
basically, there's ways to. I was looking up on Cura, Q,
Quora?
yeah, Quora, can't pronounce it,
Quora.
because this Brian Harrison guy that we were talking about. Is Brian Harris or Brian Harrison?
Brian Harris.
Brian Harris. He's got an awesome blog called videofruit.com.
Hmm.
And he said that he's not a writer, but he looks up and finds questions that people have about topics he is good at or he has knowledge in, and then he just answers those questions. And so I started doing that because I need help writing blogs. And so I found, an area that I'm kind of getting known for a little bit, which is unconventional careers. And so I found one of the biggest questions people had was, what are some unconventional ways to kind of test drive a career before getting committed to it?
Mm.
And so what I would say is a few different options, but the number one thing is speed dating.
Speed
Try
dating.
try speed dating with different career options. So if you have a month or two or a summertime, or any kind of financial runway for you to be able to go out and try different jobs, go out and do that. Spend couple weeks working somewhere and see if they would allow you to do that, because a lot of places actually might. If they won't allow you to come in and work a couple weeks at a time or a month somewhere, then ask if you can work for free for a few days or a week of your time. A lot of people might say, I need the money. I couldn't work a week for free. But what I would say is, think about it like this. If you spend a year of your life working somewhere in a job you don't like, what would that time be worth to you? I mean, it's hard to put a price tag on wasting a year of your life, especially while you're so young. So if you can go work somewhere a week for free and kind of grasp some of the fundamental parts of that job and say, like, I don't think this is really what I thought it was going to be, you could ultimately save that year of your life and not have to go work there. And so I think there's
Mhm.
that element that, people get when they join a job. There's this loyalty aspect where they want to stay on board for a certain period of time. They feel pressure from their friends and family, and there's almost a stigma that as soon as we get in college or high school, it's, what are you going to do next? What are you going to do when you graduate? That's like the number one most freaking annoying question in the whole world when you're in college, is, what are you going to do? What are you going to do? And so ultimately, after a while, I just started answering that really sarcastically and just saying, like, I think I'm going to do nothing, and just kind of gauge people's reactions, just because it was such an annoying question. But anyway, the thing is, we're expected to graduate from college and immediately go into this job and stick around for a while. But the only problem with that is, if you were 16 years old going on one of your first dates with a girl, would it be good advice to tell for somebody to tell you, hey, you shouldn't marry that girl, even though you've only went on one date? No, like, we totally accept it okay in the dating world to go around and try and date different people to figure out who we're compatible with, who makes us happy, who are we can, how can we be friends and teammates. But when it comes to jobs, we're almost expected to graduate and land one job and stay there forever, even though there are thousands of different jobs out there over the country and throughout the world. And with each one presents different unique skill sets and people and culture. And so the idea of just graduating and going to work at one job for 40 years is such an outdated concept. And sure, there's this loyalty aspect where you want to be loyal to people, you want to be loyal to your employers in all that regard. But at the end of the day, you got to be loyal to yourself. And
Mhm.
going to work one job and knowing that your skill sets might be served trying other things as well is a disservice to you.
Mm. Exactly. You want to finish your thought? Sorry.
No, no, yeah.
No, I definitely agree. In this time of age, it's not like the 40 years ago when our parents were working and they had, employee loyalty and working a job for 40 years. It's Everything's totally different today. We can all freelance. We can all, like, I remember Jeff Goins wrote the recent book, The Art of Work, and he mentioned how by 2030, over 50% of all Americans will be freelancers, and that's kind of a crazy stat to think about. Now that we have so many jobs and middle class and all these other variables that come into play. I just want to ask a quick question. Did you think college prepared you for what you're doing now?
Ooh, that's a tough question. It's going to be different for every person. For me, I started my first company when I was a junior in college. It was a clothing line, and I ran off my e-commerce site. I got a small angel investment from my dad. But I kind of bootstrapped it for a while at first, got the business up and running, and then I got asked him for some help. Um, and so college helped prepare me because I used that as a launching pad to my entrepreneurial career. And I didn't, but the actual classes themselves, there were some professors that were helpful. I think college was more helpful for me than a lot of people because I was actually already doing what I wanted to do and running a business and doing my writing and my blogging. And so when I went to these classes on marketing or leadership or whatever, I could directly apply these lessons to what I was doing. And so it wasn't some arbitrary lesson that I might apply years and years in the future. I was actually doing something in that moment. And so I think in that regard, it was helpful. And also with the kind of the meeting connections of people being able to be involved in things like leadership series,
Yeah.
where we'd have people who kind of done what I wanted to do come in and give talks. It can be a really great opportunity to meet those people through an established network like a university. And so I think that there are definitely those opportunities that more and more students should take advantage of if they decide to go to school.
Nice. How important was having mentors in your life?
Oh, it's made all the difference in the world. I mean, I mean, I don't think a lot of people when they think of mentors probably think of some, like sensei and, like maybe the Karate Kid, where you're like training alongside somebody every day for hours and hours. But most of the mentors that have been in my life have been almost short term, but we've also stayed in touch, and I may only talk to them a few times a year. But I know that they're there, and there are a lot of people. There are some mentors who are one or two steps ahead of me, and that they're not like 10 years, but maybe 20 or 30 years ahead. And they come in different forms, I guess you could say. Those kind of advice that they give aren't as actionable because they're so far ahead of me. But the people who are kind of one step ahead of me, as I mentioned, I'm working with Jaw Jung right now, and Jaw
Mhm.
published his book through Random House. We went on a book tour together, and he has an online course that he's running called Rejection Gym. And I'm helping him coordinate a lot of that business, and that's where
Mm.
I'd like to be soon myself, with traveling around, doing some speaking, publishing my book. And so being able to work with people who are just one or two steps ahead of you lets you know that it's not. I think one of the biggest things that you can realize is I can do this. I mean, that's one of the biggest things you can realize from mentors is, and then having them to help guide you along the way and seek after feedback. So.
Very cool. Would you have any quick suggestions on how to find your perfect mentor?
Ooh, how to find your perfect mentor. I think you could almost get better advice on this because you've done a really good job of intentionally reaching out to people. So what would you say?
I would say I would find people who I would want to be or who I look up to as a role model, and I would send them 10 ideas. I learned this from James Altucher. I would send them 10 ideas on how to improve their YouTube channel, on how to improve their business, how to improve their blog. So instead of every other guy asking for coffee, I'm actually someone who understands the person, who understands the business, and understands that these 10 ideas can help you um, grow or build or make more money. And when they look down at me, they say, "Oh, these five people asked me for coffee, but this guy is giving me 10 ideas without asking for anything. So he must be like kind, genuine, and honest about his intentions." That's kind of my advice.
Yeah, I think that's solid advice. I met a guy recently at he was at Yale, and he had grew up in the slums of Atlanta, Georgia, kind of a bad neighborhood, and
Mhm.
he ended up being valedictorian and got into Yale and actually received over $1 million worth of scholarships to go to Yale. I
Wow.
never knew that was even possible. And since he's been there, he's done all kinds of these crazy things, single-handedly set up a speaker series. There's a book that was published, pretty well known, called Never Eat Alone.
Mhm.
He ended up working as an intern to that guy and traveling all over the country. He's done all this before he's graduated, received a job with one of the best consulting firms, and basically just already kind of been a rock star. And I asked him, how do you get connected to all these people? Just as a student, he said, I find problems they have and I help them solve them. And the idea concept is the same as you had. And that was just another way of framing it. But I think that is the best way to not just get on the radar, but straight up impress your mentors and form long-term relationships with those people, and is to help them find the problems they have, and help them solve them. And if you're not capable of doing that because of lack of knowledge or anything, I think when you ask for their advice, actually do it. That's one of the best ways to
Oh
impress a
yeah.
mentor as well, is they get so many people asking them for advice on how to do things, and so few
But
people
no one
actually,
does them. Yeah.
nobody does it. And so actually taking their advice, putting into action, and showing them that you did, is a great way to keep those people around.
Very cool. So you went on this huge journey. You're finishing up in Alaska soon. What are your next steps? I'm curious.
Yeah, so right now I have a few different things that are kind of in the mix. One of those is I'm working on a book called I Have an Idea, and I haven't decided whether I'm going to pursue traditional publishing or self-publish this book, but it's kind of my story from when I was in college. I really struggled to be a guy who executed on a lot of his ideas. I had this giant whiteboard in my room I bought from Home Depot. It's like 12 feet long, and I wrote down all of my brilliant ideas on there for the companies I wanted to start,
Mm.
and all of the ideas I wanted to share with the world. And I'd get super excited, and I would never actually follow through on any of them. And I remember before we went on this trip, one of my good friends was talking to me, and we were having kind of a last beer before we took off, and he said, Heath, I think this idea of yours is great, traveling around the country, but you're about to get married, and your responsibilities are going to increase now that you have a wife. And he's like, I've seen you get excited about idea after idea. He's like, but I just want to see you finish something that you start. And his words really hit me hard, because I
Ooh.
knew I knew he was 100% true, that I had been a guy who got excited and talked a lot about doing cool things, but never actually followed through on them. And so I want to share my journey from being that idea guy, to somebody who actually follows through on those ideas and executes them, and actually break down how I made that transition from somebody who talked about big ideas and big dreams to somebody who just became an action oriented person to follow through on that, and maybe try to build a community around that as well. So
That would be really cool. I'll be your first reader.
appreciate it, man.
Awesome. Speaking of books, I want to ask you two final questions. What is one book you recommend any young adult to read?
One book I'd recommend any young adult. Well, after my book, no.
Once
um,
it comes out.
yeah, one book. One of my favorite books growing up was The Alchemist. I
Mm.
mean, that's one thing. A lot of I would recommend to just about anyone.
That's next on my reading list, actually. I have it on my bookshelf right here.
Really, The Alchemist.
Yeah, my friend gave it to me and they said, you have to read this book. And I said, it's fiction. And they said, no, it doesn't matter. You have to read it.
Yeah, I think that was a huge one for me. Just that I really enjoyed. That comes off the top of my head. So if I come up with another one before the end of our call, then I'll say it. But
Sure,
that would be my first one.
sure. And one last question. What is one parting piece of guidance you would want to leave with all the listeners today?
In regards to,
Unconventional living, careers, any one parting piece of advice that they can take away.
um, okay, this is what I would say.
Sure.
There's I have one of the deepest fears that I have is being at the end of my life, not and being able to look at all the things that I haven't done. And so when it comes to a decision, and I'm afraid of failing, I'm afraid of not being good enough, I'm afraid of what people might think of me, I always try to err on the side of what happens if I don't share this with the world. So I think I have keeping this constant fear of I'm okay with I'm okay with failing at something. I'm okay with people thinking I look stupid, but I'm not okay with not trying. I'm not okay with not putting
Mm.
my work out in the world. So I think if I could share one piece of advice with you, err on the side of doing too much, err on the side of looking foolish, and being okay with what people might think of you in the short term. I remember when I was in college and I was doing this clothing line, I was in left field, and some of the guys were literally on the sidelines, in the batting cage, teasing me like, Heath, how's your clothing line? And
Mhm.
kind of giving me a hard time about it. And it stung a little bit in the moment, but as I've gotten older, I realized that you can't can't listen to the people who aren't actively doing things themselves, because the majority of people who are action oriented and pursuing any kind of dream that they know how hard it is, and they're not. Those people are the ones you can listen to. The people doing stuff. Don't listen to the people on the sidelines. So
I love it. You miss 100% of the shots you don't take.
Yep.
Well, Heath, this was an amazing conversation. I want to thank you so much for coming on to the Outside of the Classroom podcast. And I'll see you next time.
Thanks, Tim.
Thanks, Heath. Welcome to Outside of the Classroom. It's your boy Pham, speaker, writer, and entrepreneur. Each week, we bring together inspiring guests to help you learn useful shit, prepare you for success, and do work you love. Thanks for spending time with me today, and without further ado, let's dive on in. What is going on, everybody? It's your boy